Europe is gearing up for war. The militarization drive is undeniable and has by now also reached the universities. But not everybody is okay with that. My guest today, in fact, quit his job as an associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark to protest the militarization of research projects. Dr. Dylan Cawthorne is a specialist in drone design and ethics, and he's here to explain to us what is going on in European academia. Dylan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Pascal.
Thanks for saying yes to this. And I told you already before, but I very much respect that you took the personal decision to quit from the university once you understood that your drone research would be, well, militarized and used for military purposes. Can you maybe explain a little bit what was going on, what happened, and why you had to take that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So over these last couple of years, the university has really changed. So I was an associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark, here in the middle part of the country, and I mean, basically, I kind of experienced in real time this militarization that's going on in Denmark. I mean, drone technology is really important to Denmark, and they see it as like a high tech weapon that we can develop in the future. So there's quite a lot of funding towards it. So yeah, basically, I felt like um, I couldn't morally go to work every day. I felt like I was being part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So I mean, my aim with technology has always been to try and make the world a better place. I know that's a very broad ideal, and yeah, maybe difficult to do in practice. But over these last 8 years or so, I've been studying ethics as well, and I've been trying to figure out how do I incorporate ethics into technological design. And
Yeah,
so, mhm.
I mean, drones are this typical now dual use technology, right? As it's called
Yes.
in the jargon. It can either be a wonderful thing to deliver packages and help us make
Mhm.
things better in society, or it can be used in order to kill people from high up, especially in the Ukraine war. We've seen how important drones have become. Something that, I mean, people kind of thought about before, but it has never been tested on that level. How
Mhm.
do I have to imagine what that did to the university that you were at and the funding schemes? I mean, how did you experience militarization in at the university?
Yeah, it was really in the use case of the drones, as you said. So, something like 6, 8 years ago, there was this whole green transition thing. So, everywhere it was green transition, and we should invest in a sustainable future. So a lot of our drones were tailored towards those kind of applications. So it was things like, monitoring of wildlife or for biodiversity purposes. It was healthcare. I developed a drone that was supposed to be used for transportation of medical samples. So yeah, it was these sort of like I would say more benign or hopefully even good uses of drones. And then over these last couple of years, especially in 2022, that's where the huge shift was really felt. That we then go in and militarize, and a lot of my colleagues that previously had been not interested or actively against making weapons changed their minds. And also, I mean, the rhetoric from the prime minister has been very like pro-military, like we support Ukraine and we build up and we put this 5% of GDP into developing weapons. And yeah, and that process had just begun at the university when I left because there was huge money coming, um,
Mm.
uh, to make weapons.
The Did they also incentivize you to work on such projects, or did they talk to the faculty? Was this a topic? Was this discussed? This like, okay, we now have more military projects, or was it just something that just happened like silently?
It had been a discussion for many years, especially in the drone research area, because it's always, as you said, it's always been a thing. So, I think something like 6 years ago, myself and my colleagues wrote a letter. We never actually sent it to our management, but we told them about it, and we said we are going to we have in Denmark are supposed to have freedom of research, as academics. And we said we were going to exercise our freedom of research, and we're not going to work on military projects. They wouldn't give us any guidelines of what we could and would and wouldn't be asked to do. If we did do some kind of counter drone technology or something, for example. So we said, okay, we don't do it, and they basically had to accept it. I mean, at least on paper, they couldn't deny us our freedom of research. What they can do is fire you when you don't get any money to pay for your research projects. So yeah,
Can you
that was
explain that? Can you explain that? Because a lot of people
yeah.
think that once you're hired by a university, the university gives you the research money because obviously they're responsible for that. But that's not how it works, is it?
No, and I also thought that because I'm not a lifelong academic. I've been in academia for 12 years, but before that, I had a different career. So I was like, yeah, you just go and you do it, you research interesting and important things, and you try to make the world better. But the university is a business, and its product is students, and it's a lot of research projects. But basically, it depends on the research area that you're in. Sometimes you will get a fair amount of funding through teaching, and that's a fairly can be a bit more of a stable income. But most of our money was from external research projects. So basically, you have to kind of pay your own way to continue to have a job. And that was my main reason for quitting. It was a combination of this reduction in freedom of research and this militarization that were happening sort of side by side, because we were always being pressured to get money.
Do you have any
Um,
do you have any information of how much of this research in that area was being paid then by the military or by NATO or security linked organizations?
I'm not sure, but in the past it was really really small or non-existent. I know that there was a project in another area that was working with Terma Aerospace that does F-35 Joint Strike Fighter stuff, but it was really pretty small, and it was also very taboo. So when our drone research group started, our first boss was a former military person, and his leadership said, "Don't you dare mention that. We don't do that stuff anymore." And he didn't. To his credit, he switched tracks, and we did civil stuff, and we did things for education and trying to build up businesses and these kind of things. So and then within the last in 2022 especially, there was a huge turn when everyone said, "Now we do it. We have to do it to protect Europe and to protect Denmark."
So it was the war in Ukraine is what tipped over the scale also at the universities to be willing to basically go down that route. So did you notice a shift in how people spoke about military research at universities?
The change was so fast, and I was amazed at how unquestioning people were about it. So a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago, there was this thing called the NFC, which is the National Forsknings Center, National Research Center. And basically, this is one of those triple helix type organizations. So the aim is to integrate the military with industry with academia.
Oh,
And so this was created sort of unilaterally, and every university was in it. I don't remember much discussion happening around that, but this thing was sort of created. And I would say in the very beginning, a few people were concerned, but it didn't really have an impact on our day to day work. What did have an impact was the war and the change in the funding schemes. So one of the things that made me particularly uncomfortable, and that was really kind of like there's a few moments where you're like, okay, this is too far, I can't do this anymore. And one of those moments was when I had a colleague, there's a professor in another research area, and he was trying to get a grant which was specifically to weaponize civil technologies. So he was going to look over our shoulders, he was going to see what we were doing, and he was going to turn it into a weapon. And
grant from who? Who would the military, I suppose?
if I remember right, it was the European Union,
Jesus. Uh,
European Commission. Yeah, because they also want to make kamikaze drones that are made within Europe, so that then we're not reliant on China, for example. So when you publish publicly, as we did, you can never know exactly what people will use your research for. But when the person is sitting right next to you and they have knowledge on what you're doing and how you're doing it, then that to me was too far, and I didn't want to be a part of it. And basically, from day to day, I just felt more and more uncomfortable, and I worried more and more about my students. I was like, the moment they leave my class, if they want to, they could literally go anywhere they want and start blowing people up. and I don't think that they have the ethical training that they need to be able to use their engineering skills responsibly.
We're
So that was a big concern for me.
Can you explain this a bit to me? Like I mean, we've had this moral dilemma or this moral issue forever, right? I mean, the people who worked on nuclear energy were also the people who, in the end, enabled, of course, the atomic bombs. I
Yes.
mean, this research goes hand in hand, right? You cannot take it apart, and it goes for many areas. I mean, and you told me you're actually originally from the aerospace industry. Um, and you've seen it there as well.
Mhm.
Maybe speak to that first, and then about this dual use character of the drones. But maybe first, like with the other areas that you know that are weaponized.
Yes. So a lot of my research in these last couple of years has been about ethically informed technological design. And a big important part of that is sort of like context. So if you're making drones and they're for healthcare use and they're probably going to be used for healthcare, then you can sort of reasonably assume that that tech will sort of be designed towards that use case. And if you are in a context where you know people are going where it's actively made as a weapon, then you can probably reasonably assume that that's how it's going to be used. There's always been this dual use character of drones, and I think and a lot of my research was actually trying to reduce this the capabilities of or the risks of dual use. So, for example, one of my drones it was quite a bit smaller than it basically it was as small as it could be. And the reason for that was just to reduce the payload capacity to carry what it needed to carry and not carry other things. So a lot of times I would say that the drones are developed that are sort of maximized in their capabilities, and that makes them very easy to misuse. There was also a lot of privacy preserving features built into that drone. There was a lot of visibility features because the requirements for a commercial drone are quite a bit different than for military technology. So, for example, you want the military drone, you want it to be very stealthy. You know, you're probably actively going to be jammed, so it needs to have very robust sort of control systems. Now they have these actual like optical wire that goes directly to the drone, and in a civil context, that would be unnecessary, right? It would be way overkill. So there are some differences in several technologies and military technologies, and I actually think I'm quite concerned about this dual use. So the Danish state is investing heavily in dual use technology. So now they have to pay this 5% of GDP, and they say, okay, don't worry, population. Not only we're going to defend ourselves from the Russians that are coming to Copenhagen, but we're also going to give you all these great civil technologies as well as sort of an added bonus, so we can sort of save money.
So like we can slap on it a hand grenade, or we can have it deliver like blood samples. Yay, that kind of scenario.
Basically, I mean, I think this is all. There's a lot of economics in this what's going on as well, uh, in my estimation. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a big boost to the Danish economy, and now they have all these customers, and basically, Mette Frederiksen said bye, bye, bye. She wants, yeah, people are spending money left and right, and the defense or the military in Denmark can't buy fast enough, and they would prefer to buy Danish products if they could, right?
Eh, Okay, is it possible though? Last follow up on this one. Like, does the European Union have the capacity to produce everything they need themselves in order to have a functioning drone industry? Because right now what we're seeing is that the EU and the US too is finding out, oh, damn, a lot of components we need are actually somehow sourced from China. Do you have any experience with that?
My experience is mostly within the Danish context, and I would say the drone industry is still very small and very new here. So that's another thing that's challenging. If you're going to do this in a good way, is just the speed at which they're trying to turn up the heat. So prior to this, the biggest military drone company in Denmark was Skywatch. I think maybe they had 40 people 50 people. I mean, this is a country of only 6, 7 million people, but still, the industries are still small. So when I was at the university, we had a research lab out at the airport here, And the idea there was to sort of create a lot of startups. So we have former students that are creating startups, and there's a few drone companies that had come out, sort of mostly dealing with civil technologies. But it's still kind of new, early days. I don't think you could compare it to. I mean, you couldn't in any way compare it to a lot of other countries that have vast experience in this.
Who in the EU has, to your knowledge, the largest drone research and industry zone?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that the Germans have quite a lot.
Okay,
Yeah, but we did have some collaboration projects with them, and they seem to have quite
okay,
good capabilities.
that would
Yeah,
make
but I'm not
sense.
sure.
Then let's talk a little bit about like the parallels now to aerospace industry where you were working
Mm,
before. Like,
yeah.
how is it comparing? Like, are all of these technologies necessarily going to be like exploited by the military too?
I think that's always been a risk. A while back, my former PhD mentor, she wrote a paper called "Civilizing Drones by Design,"
Mm.
and
Is
her
it possible?
co-author, she points out that there are important capability differences, sort of as I mentioned before. But I think inherently it's impossible, actually, because you have this remote technology.
Mm.
So you have already created a distance between you and this robot, this flying robot. So I think it just has inherent characteristics that make it pretty impossible to completely decouple from dual use. And that's another reason that I decided to leave the industry, is because basically for 6 years, I thought uh, full time about how do I make good technologies as an engineer,
Mm.
and I studied this in depth, and my understanding of ethics and how technology is used for good and bad purposes, and for violent purposes and nonviolent purposes, it kind of made me lose my belief in technology as a force for good.
That's a sad conclusion to come to, but a straightforward one as well. I mean, you know, the Napoleonic Wars,
Yep.
they used balloons as a new technology at the time to get on top and look at like what the enemy was doing. That was a military technology once. I mean, there's always a military use case for some form of new technology, especially when it comes to like stuff that's in the air.
Yeah.
Then another question though, what we know though, I mean, to be also positive, is that there
Yep.
are moments when we decide to try to curtail certain technologies. Like we've seen
Mhm.
it with bullets. There are certain
Mhm.
types of bullets that are forbidden. There are certain
Sure.
types of equipment that under international law is forbidden. We see how the Non-Proliferation Treaty tried to curtail the number of nuclear weapon states. To some extent, successful. I mean, quite successful, actually. We're still in the one digit, at least for now, of nuclear weapon states. When it comes to
Mhm.
drones, what
Mhm.
in your view is the most, I mean, most oh, the worst part of drones in warfare, in terms of like damage that they do or can do, or how you've seen how they're being used?
Yes, we're getting dark.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I have no idea how I have to imagine it. I just think it must be
Yeah.
utterly horrible. We haven't seen the
Yeah.
movies yet.
Yeah. I think probably just the connection to the person that's being killed is probably the most visceral thing, um, the most disturbing part of it that I find. So, for example, during this in this current war between Russia and Ukraine, seeing these first-person view of soldiers or people moments, seconds before they're blown up, to be you can almost see their faces.
Mm.
I think this is horrific. It's terrible. It's heartbreaking. Um, yeah, so I think that's pretty tough. And also, we learned during the U.S. drone strikes in back in 10, 20 years ago that drone pilots also get PTSD. They do really suffer because they do see the victims of their technologies. So I think, yeah, maybe even though it's a remote technology, in a way you're actually quite close to the person, and I think that's really tragic.
Um, if there, would you ban it? If would you ban drones if you had the capacity, like all or nothing?
Yes,
Mm.
I would.
The but the civilian use cases that you've been working on, what were they? What were the ones that made you most optimistic about the technology?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say there's a lot of logistics ones that seem quite promising. Moving things from point A to point B, especially healthcare stuff. So, for example, one of my projects was taking medical samples from these remote islands in Denmark to the main hospitals for analysis. So I think, yeah, maybe like there's quite a important social justice aspect to people that are in underserved communities and underserved locations that could then be served through drone technology. Um, but I think now looking back, it's usually more about economics than it is about justice. So it's a matter of how do we how do we save money and still sort of
Mm.
provide the service. So I'm actually quite cynical about about a lot of these sort of technological solutionism that a lot of people are going towards. Because I think if it's really important, you would just do it and you would find a way to do it. It's also another way to replace jobs and to displace people and to create distance between people.
Right.
So overall, I'm pretty skeptical of the technology, and it sucks too because I mean I love airplanes and I love flying things, and I used to fly remote control airplanes as a hobby, and now I see this thing I love. It's sort of been corrupted for commerce and for war, and that really breaks my heart.
Did you, I mean, you must have done or seen comparative like studies or different technology types. I mean, when I
Mm.
think about drones, what I imagine mostly is quadcopters. But
Sure.
what kind of drones are actually the most used or most, I mean, promising ones, let's say, that are being worked on?
Yeah, most of the actual use cases are using these small airplanes,
Mm.
basically called fixed wing drone. So it's imagine just a normal aircraft that flies forward on its wings, and these are really useful because they can fly very far. The quadcopters use a lot of energy to keep themselves up in the air.
Right.
So the fixed wing drones are really important. They can cover a long distance. And now there's these drones called hybrid drones that have basically it's an airplane and it has a quadcopter built into it.
Mm.
So it can take off with a quadcopter and then fly on its wings. And then when it comes to land, it can land straight up and down. So it's kind of combining the best of both worlds.
Why did it so take so long for this to come up? I mean, drones are relatively, to me, a relatively recent phenomenon. I would say I knew about their existence for about 10 years or so. Why was that not already developed in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, part of it was just the stabilization because this is an inherently unstable system that wants to tip over at all times. So part of it was just the sensors and shrinking them down. And part of it is just regulatory reasons. So that's why you don't see them just flying around everywhere. The technology sort of works. It's not 100%, but it does work. It's these pesky things like the FAA and other safety bodies that want to keep these big flying things from crashing onto people. So actually, one of the drone company that's flown the most hours commercially is called Zipline, and they flew in Africa for many years, and now they want to deliver for Walmart. So that's how they used Africa as a test ground
Uh,
in my perspective. So they flew, I don't know, maybe millions of hours delivering blood, and now they switched over to commerce in the U.S.
very interesting. But the do you think it will the I mean, the will this change like the regulatory aspect? Do you think that we're seeing a drive toward using drones? I mean, okay, for civilian purposes, in our countries more, or do you have any information on that aspect?
Yeah, so in Denmark, the discussion has been mostly about flying drones, operating drones outside of the visual line of sight of the operator.
Mm.
It's called BV loss, beyond visual line of sight. And basically, drones can't do so much useful stuff if they have to be near the operator. Right. So if I'm inspecting a windmill and I'm the operator, I could stand at the base of the windmill and then the drone flies around. But I can't deliver something a kilometer away or
Right.
10 kilometers away or 50 kilometers away. So that's been the biggest point of contention between the air traffic authority, the safety regulators, and the industry, I would say, is this beyond visual line of sight rules. And yeah, I actually see this kind of going a bit sort of independent of this military stuff, because I think that, all the safety rules and all those considerations don't play a role when you're talking about a military project, right?
Yeah, because you want to hurt people. That's the whole point
Exactly.
of the things. Um,
Exactly.
and did you follow like the war in Ukraine? Do you have any information about what types of drones have been used there, and
Mm.
also if the technology was impacted by what was learned on the battlefield?
Yeah, so that wasn't really my area of research until these last couple of years, mostly just out of interest, because I wanted to know what was going on and where my technology might be used. So my understanding is that it's basically real-time R&D is happening as we speak.
Mm.
So this past summer, I protested the drone event that we had
Mhm.
here in Denmark, myself and some other people. And at that trade, it's basically sort of a trade show, and there's a lot of academics giving talks and stuff. And this year there was maybe 400 people attending, and more than half, I would say, of the booths were about military technologies. So it's really gone quickly. And yeah, um, I would say my understanding is that these fiber optic kamikaze drones, so basically like very powerful racing quadcopters, hobby quadcopters that you can buy from China, with a RPG explosive. So the from a rocket propelled grenade,
Mm.
the sort of explosive about this big is then strapped onto it, and then you fly it with this basically with this very 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 thin tether directly maybe a few hundred meters over to blow up a tank or your enemy nearby using these goggles to be able to see through the camera. And I believe those are being used quite extensively.
So, and because it's on the cable, it cannot be jammed. So it's a very reliable connection.
Exactly. And this is an example of the very low cost. I mean, maybe they're a few hundred euros or something, maybe more, maybe less. And of course, the Russians and some of the other actors have sort of more serious, more legitimate ones. So the Russians have quite a large one. It's sort of a flying diamond shaped aircraft with this petrol engine in it. Makes sort of this droning noise, so people kind of know when it's coming. They can hear it coming. And I think that's maybe 2 or 3 meter wingspan, and that's a pretty expensive and more long range with a lot bigger explosive on it. So I think it's when you say drone, like it's a range of things, anywhere from like very small, very quiet surveillance drones to try and figure out what your enemy is doing, to these quadcopters that are flying and blowing people up, to the very big systems that some of the state actors have access to.
And I suppose, I mean, I would bet a lot of money that there's a big chunk of the research is probably also how to combine like drones with AI and use them together or not. Do you know anything about that?
I know that it's an area of research. There are some people that are, of course, very skeptical of this.
Mm.
But I have seen examples of this, mostly for like command and control kind of things, where some kind of AI system will sort of integrate different types of information and give you recommendations. But even within the military, I think there are some people that are quite skeptical and against that just because of, the quality of the information is, is very important.
Yeah. Um, Okay, like this, from your university, do you think there were active also considerations about how ethical this is, this move from civilian to the military use? Was that a big topic also among students, or is it kind of implied that that's just what it is?
I think an important topic. I didn't really see very much reflection from our leadership. They said the PM says we do this, so we do it, and look at all this money. Isn't that great? From my colleagues, there was a fair amount of discussion, actually quite a lot of discussion. Every year we have this offsite meeting and where we talk about the coming year and what are we going to do and what's our plan. And over the last several years, one of the big topics was this military stuff, and we just it went on and on and on. For my former students, I would say there was like a strong minority that was really keen to it. Some thought it didn't. Some didn't really care. They were just engineers and they like to make cool stuff. Some of them were like, "Yeah, we have to protect Denmark," and some were like, "This is this is wild. This is a big change." Um, the students that I had, they weren't particularly like I would say politically active or engaged, but
Right.
at some of the other universities in Denmark, at Aarhus and Copenhagen, for example, there have been examples of students protesting against, for example, collaboration with yeah, like Term Aerospace that makes parts for the F-35.
Right. But then at the same
Yeah.
time, you do have protests. I mean, the one that you showed behind you, and you
Yes.
are also part of a program like Drones for Peace. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so actually, it's something that I created because I felt like it needed to be on the agenda. So yeah, I my idea with Drones for Peace was basically just to promote the nonviolent use of drone technology. And yeah, I gathered a bunch of nice people this summer, and we went out to this drone show that we have every year. It was a bit ironic because I was also a participant at the show, so I had my badge on, and I was standing outside with my friends at Drones for Peace, and we were saying we don't want this. This is bad. And then I went into the show and had a talk with the people inside. So it was a very strange situation. But yeah, we plan to do it again. And basically, yeah, we're just like very skeptical of this militarization that's happening. And we really want to make peaceful technologies. And yeah, that's our aim.
Do you think would there be a possibility to create or to do research, drone research that is purely defensive in nature? You know, one of the things is with nuclear weapons, it's almost impossible to keep them purely defensive, right? Because well, because the secondary effects and whatnot. But certain technologies can be used to solemnly defend. Now, is there a way to say like, okay, would be these legitimate use cases or these legitimate cases to do research that then will end up in, for example, like how to defend against drones? If somebody tries to
Yeah.
attack you, how to take them down? Is that also being conducted, and how do you see this one?
Yeah, it is being conducted. So there's work on anti-drone technology. And I see your point. As a defensive technology, that makes sense. But also, if you're stopping someone else's attack, then that's also useful militarily, right? So, yeah, I think in the cases of like defending civil infrastructure, that could be a pretty
Mhm.
reasonable use case, right? Protecting airports. We had this supposed drone incursion at Copenhagen airport some a few months ago, which everyone still doesn't know what it was, but they claimed that there was. So that could have been a useful system to have.
Can I ask you about this one? Like, how is it possible that there's so much media buzz about supposed drones, but somehow nobody gets hold of them? Nobody can like identify them? Do you
Mm.
buy that? Or is it a hysteria, kind of a, a U-boat situation? Everybody just there was these cases in the 80s when people got like hysteric about Russian submarines in the
Mm.
Baltic, and turns out later on that was more or less a fabricated thing, more or less from the NATO side, in order to get the whip up hysteria. What do you think it was for the drone case?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely like a Red Scare kind of thing.
Mm,
Um, yeah, because I mean I think it's fairly likely that people. This is just me guessing. People probably did see something, but then they automatically said instead of saying like there's something that we need to look into, there was something in our airspace we weren't expecting. They said, well, could be could be Russians, and it could be this, and it could be that, and it could be a dual, let's say, dual threat, and all these hybrid warfare, and all these kind of things. So I think the thing that happened is one thing, and then the way that people talk about it is another. Um, so I think, yeah, they were really looking. Maybe they're just really worried and scared. That could be one justification. So they want to be on hyper alert, or they could be just really looking for a red herring, and yeah, and trying to find excuses to scare people. People were really scared here. They were very worried.
Is it possible to use drones like in this context for spying? I mean, is
Mm,
there to your knowledge technology that is so stealthy that it can
mm.
be flown over a capital of a European country, and the person flying it there would have reasonable grounds to believe that it cannot be detected?
You can make drones that are very, very hard to detect. So one of the ones that we saw demonstrated at this drone show a couple of years ago was called the Scan Eagle,
Mm,
and it's about 3 meter wingspan, and it's a flying wing. So it's a fixed wing aircraft,
mhm.
and it actually has a petrol engine, but the exhaust is pointing upward. And so it launches on this catapult, and once it gets up to a few hundred meters, it's invisible. It's You can't see it, you can't hear it, and it has this gimbal on the bottom with these very high power lenses. And they showed us the live feed, and it could zoom right in, and you could see our faces. It could identify individuals. So, and I'm not an expert in the drone detection system. So I imagine a lot of countries would have radar and these kind of things, but also these drones are fairly small. So I don't think that you could have one where it would be like a 100% chance of non-detection, but I think that you could definitely gather a lot of information using drones. Uh, some years ago, I saw a presentation about this that the South Koreans gave about some drones they found from their friends in the north, and these were basically very, very big, very fancy remote control airplanes that had they flew very low, so they were difficult to detect, and they were taking photos as they flew down the coast and then over the capital. Unfortunately, the GPS coordinates of the route was pre-programmed into the drone, so they could see where it came from and where it was supposed to be going. Um, and
Um,
that's the one or two that they found, the one or two that fell down. So I'm guessing there was probably 100 that they didn't find that had flown that same route. So
okay,
they are difficult to detect.
in conclusion, like spy war, spy drone warfare is probably not it's not science fiction. I mean, probably spy drones are flying.
Oh, for sure,
Mm,
for sure. And I mean, on the battlefield, that's of course a given.
mm.
And then outside of the battlefield, of course, it's a risk if someone finds you, right? Um, but on the battlefield, it's of course happening all the time. One of the companies I used to work at made this fairly small fixed wing drone, weighed about 2 kilos, 1.6 meter wingspan, and that has a small electric motor. And once you launch it, we did some experiments because we were trying to figure out how the sound of drones might affect people on the ground. And over, I think it was 50, 60 meters, it was undetectable audibly.
Inaudible. Mm.
Exactly. So this is using, and then they made a military version of this after the company I worked at was sold to a different company, and yeah, that's being used, I believe, in Ukraine actually.
Oh wow. Um, so I mean, in conclusion, the I mean, the technology will not disappear anymore, right? So we can all expect that more and more of this will be. I mean, they will pour money in it from all sides probably at the moment.
Yes.
The Russians, the Europeans, the Americans, drones are the future of warfare in a very sad way, right?
Yes, I believe so, and I think it's going to be the next 5 or 10 years where this huge amount of money, this 5% of GDP, will have a massive impact on Denmark and a lot of other European countries, where it will just really set the research agenda. And I would encourage my colleagues that are still in academia to consider if they want to be part of this or not, because it's coming, and you can't really say no to the money. Unfortunately, that's just the context that we operate in. So I really hope that people get together. I hope that people do collective bargaining. I hope that people join the unions and protest and do whatever they can to push back against this militarization. I mean, the society here, Pascal, is really changing. When I first arrived, I've been in Denmark since 2010, and I'd say that the Danish state did some military stuff, but it wasn't part of the everyday life. And now it's really starting to become part of the everyday life.
In what sense? I haven't been to Denmark for like almost for a long time.
Yeah. So it's making its way into the universities, it's making its way into industry, and also you just see more sort of like military stuff. There's people, talking about joining the military. The king is wearing his military uniform. So it's a total shift in mindset and in perception. 10 years ago, you would never see this. It was just super rare. Maybe every once in a while you'd see something from the home guard, which is like the people that stop if there's a marathon, the volunteers basically. But now it's just becoming a lot more common, and the culture is being militarized, I would say.
It's very sad. I mean, I suppose you read about it a lot on the newspapers and I guess, constant Russia threat.
Yeah, I think that's the perception, is that the Russians are coming to Copenhagen.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's very, very dangerous where Europe is at. If they don't stop it, if it doesn't stop, it will lead to the very war that they are saying needs to be prevented. Because if you prepare for it, you'll make it happen. You will make it happen.
Exactly.
Maybe last thing, what do you recommend? I mean, if there's other people in similar engineering fields that know that anything they do can be used for military purposes, but they don't want that to happen, what should they do? I mean, how are you organizing yourself after quitting from the university? We all need to survive somehow. We all need some income. What are you doing?
Exactly. Well, I felt like I had to leave the industry because that would be sort of the most important thing that I could do now. With all this training that I have in ethics, I was like, maybe the best thing I can do is quit. Yeah, so I'm an artist now. I've been making art for the past 5 or 6 years, and I was like, okay, well, time to shift gears and try something else. Yeah, I would really recommend that people be proactive. You would be surprised how much your speaking up creates friction and creates pushback. So that's one thing I noticed at the university was everyone was sort of like, okay, well, we just do this, and this is how it's going to be. And myself and a few other people was started asking questions, started, raising doubts and discussing and critiquing this perspective. And I think that made a big difference. Every once in a while, I go back to the university. I have friends there and I have meetings there sometimes. And people will come to me in the hallway and they'll say, "You're that guy that quit," And I say, "Yes, that's me." And they're like, "Oh, that's so interesting." And I'm like, "Yeah, come on, you should do it too." Yeah. So I think like collective bargaining, getting together, talking to your union, being part of these demonstrations. I think I'm still optimistic enough to believe that that can have an impact and that can make a difference.
Yeah, just don't be silent. I mean, the surest
Exactly.
way that nothing will change is by not speaking up and just going along with everything, right? And then, I mean, everything's lost from the start. But not everybody has to quit their jobs, but at least say like, I'm not good with this kind of stuff when it's going on.
Exactly. And if you're an academic, then at least in Denmark, you are, in theory, you have research freedom.
Hmm.
So you cannot be forced to do something that's against your moral or religious beliefs. So I would encourage people to become pacifists and to and to resist this militarization, and really sort of stand up for your rights.
I've got a very strong feeling that the next couple of years for people who are not okay with this, like resistance is going to be the main word. Because it seems that the mainstream is fully on board with full throttle ahead into the militaristic future.
Yes, that's my experience as well.
Just say no. Everybody, just say no.
Just
If
say
somebody
no.
asks you to kill somebody else, just say no. It's like,
Exactly. And if they ask you to do it indirectly by making something that will kill people, also say no.
also say no. Good. I mean, this is very practical advice. Dylan, people who want to find out more about you, your art, your writing, your thought, where should they go?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's just dylancawthorne.com. So my name.com.
Okay, I'll put a link to your website into the description of this video below. Dylan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Pascal.